Judge in Minnesota has blocked ICE, CBP, other federal agencies assisting them from impeding the free speech rights of protesters or using force against them unless they are interfering with enforcement activities. Now, it's always how they define that, but this is certainly good, big news from a ruling tonight. This was a lawsuit, of course, that was brought all the way back in December by 6 protesters on behalf of anyone who records, observes, and protests ICE's ongoing operations in Minnesota. The judge even said that ICE is not entitled to stop and search protesters in their cars solely because they are safely following ICE and other federal law enforcement at an appropriate distance. And again, we are still digesting this ruling. As I mentioned to Chris, it just came out. It's a whole lot of pages. We're looking through it. We're combing through it. But one thing is very clear. It is bad news for the Trump administration and good news for the people exercising their First Amendment rights in Minnesota. Which brings me to the other piece of breaking news we are following tonight. MSNet reported that the Department of Justice has opened a federal criminal investigation into Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. And that, to state the freaking obvious, is no coincidence. I mean, these 2 elected officials have been the most outspoken and the most passionate voices about the horror ICE is wreaking on the city of Minneapolis. And because they are actual leaders, we've all been watching them, and not malicious man-children like the current occupant of the White House and his hateful posse of Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, Greg Bovino, I could go on. They have actually called for calm from the moment an ICE officer fatally shot Renee Nicole Good last week. I mean, both Mayor Frey and Governor Walz have consistently and repeatedly called for their residents not to take the bait, to protest, but do so peacefully, so as to not give the Trump administration justification to increase its already massive federal presence in the state. And as we've all watched residents in Minneapolis being pulled from their cars by ICE agents, school communities being terrorized, pepper spray raining down on protesters, the city of Minneapolis have largely been all the citizens that we've seen have largely been doing what the governor of their state and the mayor of their city has been asking them to do. I mean, peacefully supporting their neighbors who are being attacked and targeted by ICE.
When I first put pen to paper, I was so taken aback. This nib is very smooth. It's very buttery.
But somehow this new federal criminal investigation revolves around the allegation that Frey and Walz obstructed federal immigration enforcement. Now, just a couple of notes on that. Tonight, legal experts point out that the crime of impeding federal agents requires physical force. Speaking out publicly against the way ICE is terrorizing the people of Minnesota, a fact, is not a crime, no matter how much Donald Trump wishes it was. I should also note that this very bogus, obviously political investigation is being run out of the same U.S. Attorney's Office, where just this Tuesday, 6 federal prosecutors resigned over the Justice Department's handling of the investigation into Renee Good's killing. As Governor Walz pointed tonight in his response to this investigation into him, the only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her. Just let that sit with you for a moment, because that is a fact. Now, a short time ago, Mayor Frey posted a response of his own saying, quote, "This is an obvious attempt to intimidate me for standing up for Minneapolis, local law enforcement, and residents against the chaos and danger this administration has brought to our city. I will not be intimidated." We're also going to speak with his counterpart. I mentioned her to Chris earlier, the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, and also later in the show with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar about that and everything else happening in Minnesota in just a moment. But in the midst of this incredibly upsetting and chaotic week of news, though I did start the show with some good news, I would note, I want to tell you that if you are angry, if you are outraged, if you are absolutely beside yourself about what Donald Trump is doing to our country right now, you are far from alone. You are definitely not alone. New polling out today from CNN shows that the majority of Americans call the first year of Trump's new term a failure. Back in Trump's first term, the lowest his approval rating on the economy got was -5. Now CNN has him underwater by 22 points. A new NPR Marist poll also has Trump underwater by 21 points on the economy. The poll also has Trump 19 points underwater on foreign policy. Another CNN poll shows that Americans think that ICE enforcement actions are making cities less safe rather than more safe by a 20-point margin, which how could you not think that if you've been watching what's happening in the city of Minneapolis? A poll from Yahoo found that Americans believed ICE raids were doing more harm than good by yet again a 20-point margin. But the issue where this administration stands is the most underwater, is their justification for the killing of Renee Nicole Good. Polling from CNN shows that 56% of American adults said that ICE agents' use of force in the killing of Good was inappropriate, compared to just 26% who said it was appropriate. I want to know who those people are, but 26%. That is a whopping 30-point margin. And today, Axios reported that Trump's team recently reviewed private GOP polling that showed support for his immigration policies is falling. No kidding. A top Trump advisor told Axios that while Trump himself isn't concerned about the policy, he's not a policy wonk, remember, meaning he isn't actually concerned about ICE brutality either, which there's that. But what he doesn't want is what people are seeing. He doesn't like the way it looks. It looks bad. That's from an advisor. If nothing else, I guess the man can read a poll. Yes, it does look bad because it is bad. And a lot of America is watching. I mean, polling from Quinnipiac earlier this week showed that 82% of registered voters said they had watched the video of Renee Nicole Good being shot, 82%. And as hard as it is to watch a lot of what we are seeing in Minnesota and everywhere all around the country where ICE has surged, clearly showing the world what the Trump administration is doing here is moving the needle. And I know that a lot of what I'm about to show you and tell you about is pretty rough, tough to watch. And that has been the case of a lot of what we've been showing over the last week and a half. And I know we have all been consuming a lot of these videos of Minneapolis. But it's clearly important that we don't look away. It's clearly important that we see what is happening with clear eyes, and we also spread it as far and wide as possible. Now, on Wednesday night, we brought you the news of yet another shooting by an ICE officer in Minneapolis. And after that shooting on Wednesday night, federal agents clashed with huge crowds of protesters. In the midst of that chaos was a young couple and their 6 kids driving home from a kids' basketball game. The couple, Sean and Destiny Jackson, say that they saw the clash and were just trying to drive away. But they were quickly surrounded by federal agents. Now, here's how they described what happened next to the local news outlet, CARE.
Are you looking for a home in Evergreen under $900,000? I'm Tracy Muller with Compass Colorado.
All we heard was boom, and every airbag deployed.
They say a flashbang went off near their car as tear gas enveloped them.
And I was screaming to my oldest son, Sean, I'm like, get out, get out. Like, I can't, Mom, and I can't breathe.
Destiny says bystanders pulled her into a home to check on her as she screamed that her 6-month-old child was still in the car.
He was just like lifeless, like he had like foam like around his mouth, and you can he had tears coming out his eyes. I was giving him mouth to mouth, and I remember stopping and I said, I will give you all my breath till you get yours back, because nobody wants to see their kids like that.
I mean, that's hard to watch. Destiny says that multiple members of her family had to be hospitalized. And luckily, they are all now okay. That is the good news. DHS, of course, though, responded to that incident by saying that their agents never targeted this family or their children. The agency says that the family was, quote, the victim of rioters and agitators. But that claim just sounds pretty impossible to square with the fact that their agents appear to have tear gassed a car full of kids. Now, the day before that incident on Tuesday, federal agents dragged this woman, a U.S. citizen, from her car. We showed this video. I'm sure you've seen this video. She screams at them that she's trying to get to a doctor's appointment, but they pull her from her car, cut her seatbelt, and drag her away. And DHS called her an agitator who ignored multiple commands and say they arrested her for obstruction. And Ms. Now has obtained the woman's statement about what happened to her next. And she says, quote, I asked for a doctor repeatedly when I was in ICE custody. They ignored me and took me to the detention center instead. It was not until I lost consciousness in my cell that I was finally taken to a hospital. No wonder the vast majority of Americans think that ICE enforcement actions are making America less safe, not more safe. There's a very clear dynamic happening here. The more the American public sees what the Trump administration immigration agents are actually doing, the more the American public despises it. And that shift in public opinion could be key to driving change here.